She said it again. "Daddy's in the wall." And this time, she pointed. I had just tucked Emma in, kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and then she whispered it. But what shattered me wasn't her words. It was what I found the next day. My brother's office cleared out, his name erased, his partners celebrating, like he'd died for their bonus checks. And then I saw it. Fresh drywall in the cabin basement, 4 feet wide, 6 feet tall. I haven't broken a promise to Emma in 5 years, and I won't now. Because if Michael isn't in that wall, then someone put her words in her mouth. They buried the truth thinking I'd never dig. They forgot who taught Michael how to hold a wrench. I don't swing hard. I swing precise. And I've already marked where to hit. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. Most mornings find me on my creaking porch with black coffee, watching dawn break over the pines I trim each weekend. My niece Emma, my brother Michael's daughter, leaves her crayons scattered across my kitchen table these days. Michael was always our family's golden child. Charming, successful, the one who drew all eyes while I stayed in the background, fixing what needed fixing. My jaw tightens when I think about his casual disregard for bills and broken promises. But I've kept every receipt, noted every repair at our family cabin, memorized every loose floorboard and basement echo. Some might call it obsessive, my detailed records and long memory. What matters is keeping my word, even when others won't. But let me start from the beginning. The first night after Michael vanished, I settled into our new routine. Emma's footsteps padded across the upstairs hallway as she got ready for bed. The house creaked its usual evening song, the furnace clicking on, water pipes cooling down, wind brushing maple branches against the gutters. These sounds used to comfort me. Now they just emphasized the hollow spaces where Michael's voice should have been. "Uncle Danny?" Emma called from her bedroom. "Can you check for monsters?" I climbed the stairs, my hand sliding along the worn banister. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, clutching that ratty brown rabbit she'd dragged everywhere since she was 3. Remember those childhood toys that got loved until they were barely holding together? That rabbit was missing an eye, and its ears flopped at odd angles from too many washings. "No monsters tonight, kiddo," I said, doing our usual sweep. Under the bed, behind the curtains, inside the closet. "All clear." Emma's fingers tightened around the rabbit's middle. "But what about Daddy?" My chest squeezed. "We'll find him, Em. He probably just needed some time to think." Even as I said it, the words felt wrong. Michael had pulled disappearing acts before, but never without warning, never leaving Emma behind. She beckoned me closer, her eyes wide and serious in the glow of her butterfly nightlight. When I sat on the edge of her bed, she leaned in close to my ear. "Daddy's in the wall," she whispered. My skin prickled. Kids say strange things when they're scared or confused. I knew that, but something in her voice, in the absolute certainty of those 4 words, made my hands go cold. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I kept my tone gentle, steady. "At the cabin." She hugged the rabbit tighter. "I heard noises in the wall. You ever have one of those moments when your whole world shifts? Like the ground just tilted under your feet? That's what her words did to me. I thought about our family cabin's basement, with its maze of old pipes and newer drywall sections where we'd patched water damage over the years. "Emma," I said, taking her small hand in mine, "I promise you I'm going to find out what happened to your daddy, no matter what." The weight of that promise settled onto my shoulders like concrete, but I've never broken my word to Emma, and I wasn't about to start. After she finally drifted off to sleep, I pulled out my phone and started working through Michael's digital trail. His call log showed 3 conversations with his business partners last Tuesday. Unusual for him to bunch them together like that. His calendar had a blocked-out afternoon marked only cabin meeting. 2 voicemails from our cousin Sheriff Tom, both deleted without being played. I grabbed my pocket notebook, the same kind I've used to track repairs and expenses for 20 years, and started mapping out tomorrow's plan. First stop, Michael's office, catch his partners before their morning meeting. Then the cabin, while there was still good daylight to check. Everything. My pen hesitated over that last word. In the wall. The basement's east side had that newer section of drywall, put up just last month when a pipe burst. Michael had insisted on hiring his own contractor instead of letting me do the work. At the time, I'd been annoyed, but not suspicious. You know that feeling when scattered puzzle pieces suddenly snap together into a picture you don't want to see? My stomach knotted as connections started forming. Michael's recent nervousness, the rushed contractor job, those clustered phone calls, Emma's whispered certainty. I underlined my final note twice. Promise to Emma. Find the truth. Below it, I added the date and time, making it official. Some people might call me obsessive about documentation, but detail work has saved my neck more times than I can count. Standing at the front door that night, double-checking the locks like always, I found myself staring at my own hallway walls. The house had gone quiet, except for the furnace's low hum. But now every shadow, every crack in the paint, seemed to hide something sinister. Sleep wasn't coming anytime soon. I pulled into Michael's office parking lot around 10:30 the next morning. You know, that sinking feeling when you spot something that confirms your worst fears? Well, there it was. A bottle of champagne peeking out of Blake Morrison's messenger bag as he hurried toward the building's side entrance. The elevator ride to the 4th floor gave me time to settle my face into what Michael used to call my maintenance man mask. Pleasant, forgettable, just another guy with a job to do. But what hit me when those doors opened wasn't just irregular. It was wrong. Laughter spilled from the conference room. Not the nervous kind you get when people are worried about a missing colleague. This was celebration laughter. The sound of relief and victory poorly disguised as concern. "Daniel!" Blake's smile wobbled when he spotted me. We were just discussing Michael's situation. Through the glass walls, I could see 3 other partners raising flutes of champagne. Sandra Chen caught my eye and quickly set hers down, but Robert Walsh kept his raised, challenging me with a slight smirk. "Any word from my brother?" I kept my voice neutral, watching their faces. "We're all very concerned," Sandra said, standing. "We think he might need some time off." You know how pressure can build up. Time off. Right. Ever notice how corporate types love their euphemisms? I've fixed enough broken things to know when something's being quietly disposed of. "Mind if I check his office?" I asked. Emma's missing her favorite stuffed animal. Might have left it here last visit. Blake's neck flushed red. "Of course, though we've had to redistribute some of his active files. Standard procedure when someone takes unexpected leave." I nodded like this made perfect sense and walked down the hall to Michael's corner office. Only it wasn't Michael's office anymore. New nameplates were already up. Robert Walsh, senior partner. The furniture had been rearranged, family photos cleared out, desktop wiped clean. They hadn't just redistributed files. They'd erased him. Watching through the glass, I saw Robert raise another toast. The champagne wasn't for worry. It was for removal. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the cabin. The early afternoon sun hit the old pine boards just right, highlighting 20 years of weekend patch jobs and careful maintenance. How many times had I replaced rotting steps, resealed windows, or fixed loose shingles while Michael handled the important work in the city? The key stuck in the lock like always. You had to jiggle it just so, a trick I'd never shared with Michael's contractor. Inside, musty air and dust motes swirled in the sunbeams. Everything looked undisturbed, but something felt off. You spend enough time fixing a place, you develop a sense for when it's been touched. The basement door creaked open on familiar hinges. I'd oiled them last month, knowing the sound would annoy Michael during his next visit. Funny how small acts of petty revenge can come back to haunt you. The concrete steps were clean, too clean, like someone had swept them recently. At the bottom, I pulled out my phone's flashlight and played it across the walls. The main support beams, the copper pipes I'd replaced 3 years ago. The junction box I'd rewired last summer. Every inch as familiar as my own reflection. Then the beam caught the southwest wall. If you weren't looking for it, you might miss it. A rectangular patch of plaster, maybe 4 feet by 6, slightly brighter than the surrounding surface. The same wall where Michael's contractor had worked last month. My throat went dry. Emma's words echoed, "Daddy's in the wall." I forced myself to think like a maintenance man, not a panicked brother. From my truck, I grabbed my measuring tape, the same one I've carried for 15 years. The patch measured exactly 48 inches by 72. I photographed it from multiple angles, making sure to catch the subtle color difference where new met old. The smart play was to wait, come back at dusk when gravel crunched outside. A car door slammed. I killed my flashlight and pressed against the wall near the stairs, holding my breath. Heavy boots crossed the porch above. I crept up those basement stairs like I was walking on glass, each step calculated. You know that feeling when your heart's beating so loud you're sure everyone in a 3-mile radius can hear it? Yeah, that was me. At the top, I came face to face with Sheriff Tom Mercer, cousin Tom to family. But right then, he wasn't wearing his family face. He had on his official one, complete with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Danny boy," he drawled, thumbs hooked in his belt near his service weapon. "Didn't expect to find you here." Thought I saw your truck pass by earlier. Just checking on things, I said, keeping my voice steady. Michael asked me to maintain the place. You know that. Did he now? Tom's smile tightened. Funny thing about property access. Gets complicated when ownership's unclear, especially when evidence chain of custody might come into play. My stomach dropped. Evidence of what, Tom? He shrugged, but his eyes were hard. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Point is, family matters should stay private. Don't you agree? He shifted his weight, badge catching the late afternoon sun. Speaking of family, how's little Emma doing? The threat wasn't even subtle. I'd spent enough time around Tom, growing up to read between his lines. Start poking around and custody arrangements might need reviewing. Emma's fine, I said, missing her dad. Course she is. Sweet kid. Tom stepped closer, dropping his voice. Be a shame if anything complicated her situation. Custody hearings can get real messy when family members start throwing accusations around. Know what I mean? I did. Crystal clear. The investigation had just gone from uncomfortable to dangerous. Whatever was happening, the family, or at least parts of it, were circling wagons, and I was on the wrong side. Just locking up, I said, reaching for the door. Tom nodded, that fake smile back in place. Good man, keep it that way. I waited in my truck until his cruiser disappeared down the gravel road, then watched the sunset paint the cabin walls orange. That old place held so many memories. Summer cookouts, winter game nights, Dad teaching us to split wood. Now it felt like a tomb. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. Emma's sitter met me at the door, whispering that she'd fallen asleep watching cartoons. I found her curled up on the couch, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt, crayon still clutched in one small hand. Something about seeing her there, so peaceful, made me need to check everything. Call it paranoia or instinct, but I had to know our space was secure. I moved through the house room by room, checking windows and doors, looking for anything out of place. In Emma's room, her toy chest sat open, stuffed animals spilling out like usual. But something caught my eye. A corner of dark leather peeking out from beneath her coloring books. My hands shook as I lifted them away. Michael's wallet, the same one he'd carried for years, the leather worn smooth on one corner, where he'd fidget with it during meetings. I'd seen him do it 1,000 times. I slipped it out carefully, not disturbing anything else. Inside, everything was intact. Driver's license, credit cards, even his coffee shop punch card. But tucked behind his ID was something new. A yellow sticky note, folded once, with a smudge of what looked like drywall dust along one edge. Quick as I could, I photographed everything. The wallet's position in the chest, each card's placement, both sides of the note. Then I put it all back exactly as I'd found it. Emma didn't need to know. Not yet. Back in the living room, I sat in the dark, listening to her soft breathing. The wallet was a message. But from who? Michael. One of his partners? And why planted in Emma's toy chest? A car engine growled outside, slowing as it passed the house. I stayed perfectly still until the sound faded, but the question remained. Who was watching? And what were they waiting for? I hadn't slept more than 2 hours when my alarm went off at 6. The Crossroads Diner sat at the edge of town, where nobody who mattered would spot me meeting Frank Marshall. He'd come recommended through an old contractor buddy, ex-cop turned private investigator with a reputation for being thorough and keeping his mouth shut. The bell chimed as I pushed through the door, and the smell of burnt coffee hit me like a wall. You know those places that feel stuck in 1975? This was one of them. Cracked vinyl booths, laminated menus with prices written in marker, and a waitress who called everyone Han without looking up. Frank sat in the back corner, facing the door. Mid-60s, weathered face, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied a newspaper. He didn't stand when I approached, just gestured to the seat across from him, with a coffee-stained mug. Daniel Mercer? His voice was gravel wrapped in sandpaper. Grab some coffee. We'll need it. I slid into the booth, and a chipped mug appeared in front of me like magic. Thanks for meeting me. Your friend Carl vouched for you. Said it's family trouble? My brother disappeared 5 days ago. But it's not that simple. Frank folded his paper and took off his glasses. It never is. Lost my own brother back in '92. Different circumstances, but he shrugged, letting the rest hang there. Tell me what you've got. I laid it out piece by piece. Michael's vanishing act, his daughter's cryptic warning, the office celebration, the cabin wall, and Tom's threats. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small spiral pad. Show me the wallet photos, he said when I finished. I passed him my phone. He studied each image, zooming in on details I hadn't even noticed. Planted evidence is usually cleaner than this. They left fingerprints all over it, metaphorically speaking. And that plaster job at the cabin? Amateur hour. So, what's our first move? Hour, huh? Frank's mouth twitched. All right, you know the players and the money. I'll run background checks, look for patterns. Meanwhile, you map out every relationship, every account connection. Something this messy, there's always a paper trail. I pulled out my notebook and sketched the basic web. Michael's partners, the sheriff, known accounts. Frank added notes in the margins, drawing lines I hadn't seen. Look here, he said, tapping the page. These vendor payments, they're routing through shell companies. Started about 3 months ago. And your cousin Tom? His signature's on half the approval forms. Law enforcement's definitely tangled up in this. My hands went cold. I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made it real. How deep does this go? Deep enough that they're pushing debt into your brother's name, setting him up as the fall guy for something bigger. Frank pulled out a burner phone and slid it across the table. Use this for anything related to the case. Your regular phone's probably already compromised. We spent the next hour building a timeline. The pattern was ugly. Systematic transfer of liabilities into Michael's accounts. All perfectly documented and legal looking on the surface. By the time we finished, my coffee had gone cold. I can request access logs from the cloud services they use, I said. Might show who altered what documents and when. Frank nodded. Do it, but carefully. They're watching you now. The diner had filled up while we talked. Morning regulars with their routines. Living normal lives. Must be nice. One more thing, Frank said as I stood to leave. That wall at the cabin? Your brother's not in it. This is about money, not murder. Remember that when things get complicated. I stepped outside into a gust of wind that carried the sharp smell of coming rain. The burner phone felt heavy in my pocket, like a piece of evidence itself. But for the first time since Emma's whispered warning, I felt like I had solid ground under my feet. For 2 straight days, Frank and I lived in spreadsheets and corporate filings. Ever try to untangle a web of shell companies? It's like following spaghetti through a maze, in the dark. But that's where having someone like Frank helped. He'd seen every trick in the book. We commandeered a back room at his office, tacking timelines and connections to a corkboard, like something out of a crime show. You know those moments when scattered pieces suddenly form a picture? That's what happened around hour 30. Look at this pattern, I said, tracing a line of transfers. Every time our family trust made a major investment, these 3 vendor LLCs popped up with matching withdrawal amounts. Frank leaned in, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. And your cousin Tom signed off on each one. No other sheriff approvals. Just his. Right before Michael disappeared, the partners dumped nearly $500,000 in losses into accounts with his name on them. My finger jabbed at the dates. Then they throw a party when he's gone? They weren't celebrating his absence. They were controlling the narrative. Smart play, Frank admitted. Keep investors calm. Point fingers at the missing man. Classic misdirection. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. The cabin wall kept nagging at me. They needed something physical. Something that would stick in people's minds. Emma's 5. If someone told her daddy was in the wall, she'd believe it. And she'd tell me. Making you think the worst while they cleaned house. Frank nodded. Psychological warfare. I pulled out my notebook and drew 2 columns. Confirmed frame and need proof. Under confirmed, I listed the vendor patterns, Tom's signatures, and the timing of debt transfers. The other column was shorter, but crucial. Who was moving money now, and where was it going? We need server logs, I said. See who's accessing these accounts, when, and from where. Frank handed me a stack of forms. Already drafted the requests. Everything's by the book. Metadata only, tied to specific transaction IDs. Your signature here and here. I signed, trying not to let my hand shake. After days of discovering betrayal after betrayal, having solid evidence felt like opening a window in a stuffy room. You know what this means? I said, capping my pen. We can prove Michael was set up. Clear his name, expose the partners. Don't celebrate yet, Frank warned. Money's still moving. Speaking of which, check that alert I set up. I logged into the bank portal on my burner phone. Our family trust had several linked accounts, but only Michael should have had access to the main one. I hit refresh, and my breath caught. Frank, I called. We've got live movement. Someone's transferring $50,000 out of the primary account right now. He was behind me in 2 steps. Timestamp? Started 30 seconds ago. Going to... Hold on. I watched digits flow across the screen. It's routing through one of those vendor LLCs we flagged. Can you see the authorization code? I zoomed in on the transaction details. Yeah, damn. That's Michael's personal code. Not the trust's master key, his specific identifier. Frank's expression hardened. So, either someone has his login credentials, or he's the one moving the money, I finished. The thought hit me like ice water. All this time I'd been building a case to clear his name, and here he was, draining accounts in real time. Document everything, Frank said. Screenshots, timestamps, routing numbers. Don't interrupt the transfer. Let it complete so we have a clean record. My fingers felt numb as I captured each detail. The transfer finished at exactly 3:47 p.m., leaving a digital trail that led straight to Michael's access codes. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered to prove his innocence now looked different. The partners' celebration wasn't about framing him. It was about being rid of him. I've been an idiot, I said, staring at the screen. Building this whole case to rescue someone who played you. Frank cut in, used his own daughter as cover while he cleaned out the accounts. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I watched the server logs populate our screen like falling dominoes. Each login carried a digital fingerprint, IP address, timestamp, and network identifier. One pattern kept repeating, connections from a Wi-Fi network named Azure Views 5G. Hold up, I said, my throat tightening. I know that network. It's from that luxury condo complex near the lake. Michael used to book their executive suite whenever he had business meetings out of town. Frank leaned closer, squinting at the data. Same login credentials each time? Yeah, and look at the timing. Always between 2 and 4 p.m. Like clockwork. My hands felt cold. He's not missing. He's not in any wall. He's sitting in a damn lakeside condo, stealing our family blind. Slow down, Frank said, pulling out a fresh notepad. Let's work this backwards. What exactly do we know? I pushed away from the computer, my chair scraping against the floor. The diner's coffee had gone bitter in my mouth. Michael's access codes are being used to move money through those vendor accounts we traced. And the logins come from a place he's known to use. My voice sounded hollow. During specific hours that match his old routine. Frank nodded, making notes. What else? The timing of his disappearance. The pieces were clicking together like a lock mechanism. It wasn't random. He waited until those debts were loaded into his name, knowing everyone would assume. I stopped, the full weight hitting me. Knowing they'd assume he ran from the debt, that the partners forced him out, making you the perfect shield, Frank said quietly. While I was knocking on doors, demanding answers, I pressed my palms against my eyes. I kept the spotlight on his disappearance, while he moved the money, even used his own daughter to sell it. The memory of Emma's whispered words about the wall twisted in my gut. Had he coached her? Or just known his little girl would eventually say something to make me search there? Frank's pen scratched against paper. So, what's our new timeline look like? I reached for my own notebook with unsteady hands. He stages the vanishing act, probably right after setting up at the condo. Partners celebrate, thinking they've pushed him out. I start investigating, which keeps attention on them instead of the accounts. Meanwhile, he's systematically draining funds through those vendor shells. And your cousin the sheriff? Insurance, I said, the bitter taste growing stronger. In case anyone looked too closely at the money movement. Tom's signatures on those vendor approvals. He's part of it. Has to be. Frank set his pen down. What's your play? I stared at the transaction logs, at the precise timing of each transfer. We can't spook him. If Michael realizes we know, he'll ghost with whatever's left. And if we tip off Tom, the whole thing goes sideways, Frank finished. We need leverage. I pulled up the vendor documentation again. These shell companies, they're Michael's safety net, but they're also his partner's protection. If we can prove the money flow, we can make them turn on each other. Frank nodded. Question is, who breaks first? I thought about the champagne toast in Michael's office. The fake concern masking relief. The partners. They think they're safe because Michael's gone. But if they realize he's alive and stealing what's left, they'll throw him under the bus to save themselves, Frank said. Especially if the sheriff's involved. Nothing scarier than a cop who might go down. We spent the next 3 hours building the plan. Surgical precision was key. We needed to show just enough evidence to crack the partners' unity without revealing our full hand. One leaked document here. One anonymous tip there. Like setting up dominoes. By midnight, I was back home, standing in Emma's doorway. Her nightlight cast soft shadows on the wall, and I could hear her steady breathing. The word wall echoed in my head. But it wasn't scary anymore. It was sad. My brother hadn't just betrayed me. He'd used his own daughter's innocence as a smokescreen. I watched her sleep. This little girl who trusted me to find answers. The truth wasn't what I'd expected, but it didn't change my promise to her. If anything, it made it more important. Frank's last words at the diner rang in my ears. Remember, the minute we start this, there's no going back. You ready for that? I'd nodded then. Standing in Emma's doorway now, I nodded again. The envelope sat on my doormat like a snake, government certified and ready to strike. My hands shook as I tore it open, though I already knew what poison waited inside. Ever notice how bad news always comes on pristine paper? Inside, black letters marched across white in neat rows. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. 30 days. They were giving me 30 days before they'd take my house. Emma's home. I sank onto the couch, the morning sun cutting across the floor where Emma's toys lay scattered. The letter listed amounts, deadlines, legal requirements, but all I could see were the walls around us. The safe space I'd promised to maintain, crumbling. My fingers found Frank's number without looking. He answered on the second ring. "They're moving faster than we thought," I said, voice rough. "Foreclosure notice. 30 days. How bad?" I pulled up my accounts on my phone, though I knew the numbers by heart. I've got maybe 8,000 in savings. Monthly bills eat 3,000. The garage brings in decent money, but I swallowed. With legal fees coming. And if this drags out, razor thin, Frank finished. Yeah, I rubbed my face. And that's assuming Michael doesn't drain anything else before we can stop him. The morning traffic hummed outside as I stepped onto the porch, letting the screen door whisper shut behind me. The old steps creaked under my weight. Another repair I'd been meaning to get to. How many more creaks would these boards suffer before strangers owned them? My truck sat in the driveway, faithful as always. Could probably get 15,000 for it, maybe more. Enough to buy time, at least. The thought of selling it made my chest tight. That truck had carried Emma to her first day of kindergarten, hauled Christmas trees, moved Michael's furniture when I pushed the memory away. The truth was, even selling the truck might not be enough. Maybe it was time to admit defeat. The screen door squeaked, and small feet patted onto the porch. Emma stood there in her pajamas, holding her cereal bowl carefully with both hands. She settled beside me, shoulder warm against my arm as she spooned Cheerios into her mouth. "Uncle Danny? She set her spoon down, those serious eyes finding mine. "Are you going to stop being the strong one?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. Out of nowhere I remembered her first steps. How she'd fallen, gotten up, fallen again, but kept going until she reached what she wanted. She hadn't known about defeat then. I looked at her, really looking at me, waiting for an answer that would tell her what kind of world she lived in. A world where the strong ones quit, or a world where they found another way. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm not stopping." She nodded once, satisfied, and went back to her cereal. Inside, I pulled out my notebook and a fresh pen. We couldn't outspend them, couldn't outrun them, but we could outsmart them. Michael and his partners had built their trap with paperwork, signatures, approvals, shell companies. Every signature was a fingerprint. Every approval was a connection. And connections meant leverage. I started sketching the web, drawing lines between players. Michael's partners would be watching their backs now, paranoid about exposure. The sheriff cousin would be especially twitchy. One whiff of investigation, and his career was toast. They'd all signed off on those vendor accounts thinking Michael would take the fall. But what if proof started appearing? Little breadcrumbs, dropped carefully where ambitious investigators or nervous accountants might spot them. Not enough to build a case, but enough to make the co-conspirators sweat. Enough to make them wonder who might talk first. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Frank. 30 days. Trap starts today. Then I opened my notebook to a clean page and wrote a single word. At the top, leverage. Frank spread the files across my kitchen table after Emma was in bed. "We need this to look like an inside whistleblower," he said, tapping the stack. "Someone who's been watching, taking notes, building their case." I nodded, pulling up my laptop. And scared enough to start leaving breadcrumbs. The house settled around us as we worked. Just the click of keys and shuffle of papers. Every now and then, I'd glance toward Emma's room, remembering why we had to get this exactly right. "Start with the plaster photos," Frank suggested. "But don't send them yet. Just reference them in the emails. Make them wonder who has what." My fingers moved across the keyboard, crafting the first message. "Regarding unauthorized structural modifications at the Mercer family property. documented on June 15th between 2 and 4 p.m. Multiple photographs and measurements on file. Cross-referenced with building permit applications. None found. Good, Frank murmured. Now link it to the money. I pulled up the transaction records I'd been keeping for years. Habit, really. Tracking every repair, every upgrade at the cabin. Dates, amounts, vendors. The kind of details only someone involved would recognize. Remember, Frank said, we're not accusing. We're just asking questions that make them nervous. I drafted another email, this one mentioning specific voucher numbers and approval timestamps that matched the shell company transfers. Added a casual reference to Michael's wallet being found, with that telltale drywall dust, in a place that suggested careful planning rather than panic. Now for the distribution, Frank said, pulling out a notepad. Who gets what and when? We mapped it out like a chess game. First move, an anonymous tip to the business board's audit chair, just enough detail to trigger standard review protocols. Second, a more detailed packet to the Attorney General's office, routed to land on certain desks in the Sheriff's Department. The timing had to be perfect. Let each group think others were already investigating. Calendar invites, I said suddenly, for their weekly partner meeting. Frank raised an eyebrow. They'll have to sit there together, I explained, wondering who knows what. Who might crack first? He smiled slowly. Add a conference line. Make them paranoid about who might be listening. I worked through the night, building the dossier. Photos, transaction logs, timeline annotations. Everything organized with the precision of someone who'd been documenting corruption from the inside. Finally, I drafted the coup de grace. A formal request for whistleblower protection, citing specific ledger entries that any investigator could verify. Ready? Frank asked as the sky started to lighten. I looked at the send queue we'd set up. 6 messages. Time to hit over the next 48 hours. Each one building pressure. Each one making the co-conspirators question their loyalty to Michael. Think about it, Frank said quietly. They signed those approvals thinking Michael would take the fall. Now they'll wonder if he planned to sacrifice them instead. I remembered Michael's partners celebrating his disappearance, the Sheriff Cousins' threats, all of them thinking they could bully me into silence. They deserved to sweat. Frank checked his watch. Almost time. You sure about this? I thought about Emma asking if I'd stop being the strong one. Yeah, I'm sure. The first light of dawn was fading as storm clouds rolled in, darkening the street. I clicked send on the first batch of emails. Watched the progress bar tick across the screen. Done. Thunder rumbled overhead as my phone buzzed. A reply already. I turned it over slowly, feeling Frank lean in to read the message with me. We should talk immediately. Off-site. Frank's low whistle matched my thoughts exactly. They were scared, and scared people made mistakes. Now we wait, he said, gathering his files. Let them stew for a few hours. Maybe call each other. Try to guess who's talking. I walked him to the door as the first fat raindrops hit the porch. The storm was rolling in fast now, matching my mood perfectly. Inside, I could hear Emma stirring, probably woken by the thunder. Time to make breakfast, pack her lunch, keep our normal routine. While across town, the carefully crafted panic was just beginning to spread. The hotel bar smelled like old coffee and anxiety at 9 the next morning. Tom Barrett, one of Michael's senior partners, was already there, drumming his fingers on a scratched table near the window. His usual Brooks Brothers polish had slipped, tie crooked, hair uncombed. You could practically see the wheels spinning behind his eyes. I took my time walking over, remembering Frank's advice. Let them fill the silence. Nervous people always do. Daniel. Tom half stood, then sat again quickly. Thanks for, I appreciate. I slid into the booth across from him, set my phone on the table. Frank had shown me how to use the recording app, walked me through his counsel checklist. Document everything. Get specific names and dates. Let them talk themselves into corners. Rough morning? I asked mildly. Tom's laugh came out shaky. You could say that. Listen, about those emails, the documentation you mentioned. Pretty detailed stuff, I said, watching him flinch. Lots of specific sign-offs, timestamps. That's what I needed to. He glanced around the empty bar, lowered his voice. Look, those approvals, the transfers, we were under enormous pressure from your cousin Steve. I kept my face neutral, though my pulse kicked up. The sheriff cousin, finally named. Steve said the temporary transfers were standard procedure, Tom rushed on. Said Michael had greenlit the whole thing. We just had to sign the forms, route the money through those vendor accounts for a few weeks. Michael swore it was all above board. I let the words settle, remembering Frank's checklist. Get them to volunteer names. Get them to specify actions. Get them to establish timeline. When exactly did Michael approve this plan? I asked. 3 weeks before he left. Tom's hands couldn't stay still, adjusting his coffee cup, his napkin. Steve brought the paperwork to that Thursday partner lunch. Michael signed everything right there, said it was just temporary accounting cleanup. I nodded slowly, watching Tom's face. And now? Now? He barked another unsteady laugh. Now I'm looking at those transaction records you referenced, those timestamps, and realizing we're all exposed. If the board's audit chair starts digging... He pulled out his phone, fingers trembling slightly. I can't risk my career on Michael's schemes. I'm sending everything to the audit committee right now. I sipped my coffee, letting him type frantically. Frank had predicted this. The moment self-preservation would trump loyalty. Done, Tom said, showing me the sent email. I've forwarded all the original approvals, the routing instructions, everything. They'll see Michael orchestrated the whole thing. Smart move, I said quietly. Back in my truck, I called Frank and played him the recording. He grunted in satisfaction. Perfect, he said. Their whole house of cards is about to collapse. I'm sending this to my contact in internal affairs, along with supporting documentation. The board will get their copy simultaneously. I pulled into the hotel parking lot's far corner, twisted the top off my thermos. The coffee was still hot, still had that morning-at-home taste that felt surreal now. My phone buzzed with updates as Frank worked his end. First message, board emergency session called for 2 p.m. Third message, additional partners requesting meetings. The rain started then, fat drops hitting my windshield. I watched the water trail down the glass, thinking about walls and secrets and brothers who betrayed trust. My screen lit up one more time, a formal notification from the county court system. I opened it slowly, already knowing what I'd find. There it was, Michael's full legal name at the top of a subpoena ordering him to appear and answer charges of financial fraud and embezzlement. The rain drummed harder as I sat there, holding my cooling coffee, watching the hotel's revolving door. Another partner hurried in, collar turned up against the weather. Another domino about to fall. I thought about Emma, safe at school right now, probably painting or reading stories. She'd been right about the wall, in her own way. Not about Michael being inside it, but about secrets hidden behind careful surfaces. Now those surfaces were cracking, and truth was pouring through. My phone buzzed again. Frank's message was simple. It's starting. I tracked the courthouse chaos from my truck, parked across the street where I could see everything unfold. Local news vans had started arriving around noon, their satellite dishes reaching up like metal fingers against the gray sky. By 2 o'clock, the steps looked like a media circus. You ever watch someone's world implode in real time? It's a strange thing, seeing it happen through phone screens and news feeds, knowing you helped set it in motion. My phone buzzed with alerts as different stations picked up the story. Breaking news. Local business leader faces fraud charges. Prominent developer named in financial investigation. Each headline felt like another nail being driven home. At 3:15, Michael appeared at the top of the courthouse steps with his lawyer, some sharp-suited guy I'd never seen before. They pushed through the reporters, Michael keeping his head down, jaw tight. He tried to catch our Aunt Margaret's eye as she walked past, but she turned away like he was a stranger. Uncle Pete did the same, shoulders stiff as he headed for his car. Sources confirm multiple shell companies used to conceal fraudulent transfers, one reporter announced, holding her microphone steady. Documents show systematic embezzlement through vendor accounts over a 3-month period. I checked my own documentation, adding timestamps and notes about who avoided Michael, who refused comment. The guardianship petition would need everything properly logged. Frank had drilled that into me. Detail matters, especially with family court. My screen lit up with a press release from the board. I read it twice, letting each word sink in. Effective immediately. Michael Mercer is suspended from all duties pending resolution of criminal charges. The board expresses its profound disappointment. Another buzz. The Sheriff's Department announcing an internal investigation into possible irregularities in financial oversight. They didn't name Steve directly, but everyone would know. The thin blue line had its limits, especially when money went missing. The cameras loved it all. The family tension, the business disgrace, the law enforcement angle. They kept rolling as Michael finally reached his car, nearly running now, his lawyer trying to shield him from questions. Mr. Mercer, did you use the family cabin to stage your disappearance? Any comment on the shell companies? What about your daughter, Mr. Mercer? That last one made my fingers tighten on the steering wheel. Emma, Everything came back to protecting her. I watched Michael's car pull away, reporters trailing behind like hungry dogs. My phone buzzed again, Frank checking in. Coverage going as planned, I texted him. Family's doing exactly what you predicted. Good, he replied. Board suspension? Done. Full suspension, pending litigation. I hesitated, then added, thank you. For everything. His response came quick. Finish it. The sun was setting by the time I got home. Emma had spread her coloring books across the kitchen table, working intently on what looked like our front porch. She'd drawn bright yellow bursts all around it, like the whole house was catching sunlight. Hey kiddo, I said, kneeling beside her chair. That's some beautiful artwork. It's our house, she said, reaching for another crayon. I made it happy. My throat got tight. Tomorrow's going to be better, I told her. Things are going to be calmer now. She nodded, already focused on adding more sunbursts. My phone buzzed one last time. An email from the court clerk. I opened it, holding my breath. Guardianship hearing scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Courtroom 3B. I watched Emma color, her small hand steady as she worked. She hadn't asked about Michael once since that night she'd whispered about the wall. Maybe she'd known more than any of us, in her own way. You know what's strange about family court? How quiet it is. Nothing like those dramatic TV shows where everyone's shouting objections. The morning sun came through tall windows, making patterns on the worn carpet while we waited. My binders sat stacked on the table in front of me. 3 months of my life compressed into tabs and indexes. Emma was with our neighbor Mrs. Chen in the hallway, probably drawing or reading. Better that way. Some things kids shouldn't have to sit through, even when it's all about them. Mr. Mercer? The clerk's voice carried across the nearly empty courtroom. Judge Harrison will see you now. I straightened my tie. The blue one Emma had picked out that morning because it matched my eyes. Funny how kids notice those things. Judge Harrison was younger than I expected, maybe early 50s, with reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the filing. She looked up when I approached. Good morning, Mr. Mercer. I understand you're seeking temporary guardianship of your niece, Emma Mercer? Yes, Your Honor. My voice came out steady. I'd practiced this part with Frank last night. I see you've brought documentation. She gestured to my binders. Walk me through your current arrangement. I laid out Emma's life like building blocks, her bedroom with the star-patterned curtains she'd picked herself, our nightly reading routine with voices for different characters, the way she helped feed our ancient goldfish every morning before breakfast, regular stuff that matters when you're 5. She's enrolled at Riverside Elementary, I continued. Mrs. Chen next door handles after-school care when I'm working. Emma's made friends with her granddaughter. They take dance class together on Thursdays. The judge nodded, making notes. And the financial situation? I see there's a foreclosure notice. Yes, Your Honor. I pulled out the timeline Frank had helped me prepare. I've arranged bridge financing to cover the next 30 days. I have affidavits from my employer confirming steady income, plus character references from neighbors and Emma's teacher. I passed forward Frank's detailed statement about the investigation and my cooperation. The judge spent several minutes reading it, her expression unchanging. Tell me why temporary guardianship is in Emma's best interest right now. This was the heart of it. I leaned forward slightly. Emma needs stability while these legal proceedings unfold. She has routines, friends, a support system in place. Moving her now, with everything else in flux, would only add trauma to an already difficult situation. Judge Harrison picked up the criminal complaint against Michael, recently added to the file. And your brother's current status? In custody, Your Honor. The charges are substantial. My throat wanted to tighten, but I kept my voice level. Emma deserves protection from that upheaval. She deserves a chance at normal. The judge removed her glasses, studying me directly. You understand this is a significant responsibility, particularly given the complex circumstances? I do, Your Honor. Emma's been my priority since the day she was born. That won't change. She nodded once, decisively. I'm granting temporary guardianship for 60 days, with review after that period. The clerk will provide the necessary documents. I expect weekly updates on Emma's adjustment and any contact attempts by her father. My shoulders dropped about 2 inches. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, Emma was waiting with Mrs. Chen. She ran to me, and I caught her hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. The morning air felt different somehow. Cleaner, like after a storm passes. Ice cream? Emma asked hopefully. Mrs. Chen laughed. She's been very patient. Tell you what, I said. First we need to stop at Anderson's Hardware. Then maybe ice cream. The bell over Anderson's door jingled just like it had since I was Emma's age. I loaded up the cart. 2 gallons of exterior white paint, good brushes, drop cloths, painter's tape. The basics for starting fresh. The sun was setting by the time we got home. I set the paint cans on the porch, while Emma helped spread out drop cloths, chattering about what colors we should do the trim next time. The old boards creaked under my feet. Familiar sounds, home sounds. Looking at those paint cans catching the last light, I felt something settle in my chest. Tomorrow we'd start early, while the morning was cool. Just me and Emma, making things new again. Mid-morning sun warmed my shoulders as I popped open the first can of paint. Inside, the TV murmured through the screen door. Another update about Michael. You know how news channels love to replay the juicy bits. Sources confirm multiple fraud charges have been filed against Michael Mercer, following allegations of systematic embezzlement. I dipped the brush and made that first clean stroke across weathered wood. The white paint went on smooth, like erasing years of storm damage. Behind me, the anchor's voice continued painting a different kind of picture. In dramatic scenes outside the courthouse, family members refused to acknowledge the accused, walking past without comment. They kept showing that clip of Michael on the courthouse steps. Suit jacket pulled tight, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The golden boy, tarnished at last. You'd think it would feel better, watching him fall. Instead, I just felt tired, ready to focus on something real. Emma's voice piped up from the doorway. Can I help? Sure can, kiddo. I handed her a smaller brush I'd bought special. Stay on the drop cloth, okay? And nice, steady strokes. Just like coloring. She took to it naturally, tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on the lower rails. The TV droned on about Michael's suspension from the board, about internal investigations and forensic accountants. But out here, all that mattered was the rhythm of brushes and the smell of fresh paint. Look, Uncle Danny. Emma held up her brush. I didn't drip. Professional quality work there. I grinned at her proud smile. The railing she'd done was patchy but honest. Exactly what 5-year-old painting should look like. The morning stretched on, peaceful despite the newscast's attempts to stir drama. We worked our way across the porch, transforming dark, weathered boards into something clean and bright. Every stroke felt like writing a new page. Remember how porches used to be? Growing up, they were gathering places, where stories got told, where truth lived in plain sight. This porch had seen plenty of lies lately, but watching the white paint cover those stains, I could almost feel the honest wood underneath taking a deep breath. Emma's small hand tugged my sleeve. Is it pretty now? I stepped back to look, brush dripping slightly. The fresh paint caught sunlight and threw it back, making the whole front of the house look like it was waking up. Yeah, honey, it's pretty now. My phone buzzed. Calendar reminder for next week's hearing. Funny how it didn't twist my gut anymore. The paint was drying, clean and straight. The evidence was filed and solid. Everything in its proper place. I snapped a quick photo of the finished rails, bright white against the drop cloth, and sent it to Frank with just one word. Done. Emma was studying her handiwork, head tilted like a critic at a gallery. Paint had somehow found her nose, which seemed about right. She'd earned her painter's badges today. Come here, you. I scooped her up, careful of paint-splashed hands, and did one quick spin on the new boards. She squealed, and the porch creaked its familiar song under our feet. A breeze caught us, carrying the sharp, sweet smell of drying paint. Setting my brush down, I looked at our morning's work. The porch gleamed like a fresh start, honest and strong. Everything that needed saying was right there in that clean white paint. I heard myself tell Emma, truth is the only unbreakable wall. She nodded like she understood, though maybe she just liked how the words sounded. That was okay. She had time to learn what they meant. The morning sun kept climbing, drying our handiwork into something permanent, something real.